Welcome into the television version of Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. I'm delighted you've tuned in and joined with me today here on Strategies for Living. We're all about helping us live healthier, happier, and more peaceful lives in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirits, in our relationships here in the 21st century. We do that by engaging in important conversations with life strategists. Each and every time we do Strategies for Living, our life strategist makes history fun. Now, you may be saying, wait a minute, I took a history course in college. My history teacher wasn't as pretty as this one, and she or he sure didn't make history fun, Dr. Cheryl White, but you do. You are an assistant professor of history at Louisiana State University in Shreveport.
That's right.
And the author of several books, including, is this fun or what? Historic Haunts
it's a fun
of
book.
Shreveport. Wicked
Shreveport.
And your new book, Confederate General Leonidas Polk,
right.
Louisiana's fighting bishop.
Yes, indeed.
Well, you do make history fun.
Well, history is fun.
History is fun. And in terms of, we need to know where we came from.
Yes.
To know where we're going.
Yes, absolutely. It's fundamentally important to us as human beings to understand sort of our backstory, if you will.
Yeah.
And each of us has a story. I tell my students all the time that, nobody springs up out of the ground. Nobody comes from nowhere. Everyone has a story.
It's all story, isn't it?
It is all story.
And even the word, when we look at it,
yes.
His story, history
Our
is his
our story is certainly
our story.
in the word, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the historic haunts of Shreveport, and one is pretty close to where I live. It's in my neighborhood. I can walk to it.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Davis.
Oh, the Davis home.
Yeah,
yes, the Davis home. Right.
So how did you get interested in
Well,
this?
I'll tell you a little bit about the genesis of actually both of these books, Historic Haunts and Wicked Shreveport. The History Press in Charleston, South Carolina is a national press that goes into metropolitan markets of a given size. I think they have a certain sort of prescribed demographic they look for.
And we meet that criteria.
We meet that criteria.
Okay.
And they came in and spoke with the history faculty at LSU in Shreveport and actually asked for a series of books on Shreveport history. The first one was actually a book called Lost Shreveport.
Oh, we had Ernie
Joyner and
Ernie Robertson
wrote.
Yeah.
That's right. And then Historic Haunts of Shreveport is the one that I co-authored with Dr. Gary Joyner. It's the second in the series. And Wicked Shreveport, which is a true crime, some of the more sensational crime history of Shreveport. So there was actually a series of books. The Historic Haunts book was actually, I think, the most fun to work on because it was a way of telling the story of Shreveport through a very different lens, using the lens of haunted folklore. Every town has it.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I don't disbelieve anything. That's how I will qualify that answer.
Because we have a couple that live in our house.
Is that right?
We have we live in 100-plus-year-old house.
Then you absolutely have a ghost.
We have a couple.
And I'll tell you sort of my understanding of that as a historian. Anytime that you go into an old building or an old place, a place that obviously, a structure that bears all of the impressions of everyone who ever lived there. There is a tangible kind of energy to those places that has nothing to do with the paranormal.
Right.
I've experienced it many times as a historian, being in an old place and realizing the weight of the story that is there.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the way I look at these things. Is the Logan Mansion haunted? I mean, is there a physical apparition that moves through those hallways? No, I don't think so.
Well, some of my folks, I was in the radio business for many years, and KCOZ Radio was in the Logan Mansion for many, many years.
Yes.
And I've talked to a few people that said, yeah, I was on the midnight to 6 a.m. shift, or I was on the 7 to midnight shift. And,
right, I've heard those stories.
I heard the footsteps down the stairways, and I knew I was the only other person in the building.
Right.
Me and the tapes were the only thing in the building.
Right.
So I don't know. I never personally had the experience, but I've talked to many people.
I've heard many people who have had what we would call paranormal experiences, and I think it's helpful, for academics to just remember that the word paranormal means there's something we don't understand.
Right.
Rather than trying to put it in a box and say that there's necessarily a haunting going on there, certainly something did happen to that young man that I spoke with that worked when it was KCOZ. He had a real paranormal experience
there.
Right.
Well,
right.
So you went into some of these buildings,
Yes.
and in Haunted Shreveport, and you do a tour.
Yes, we do a tour that is sort of springboarded off of the book. Actually, we realized that with the popularity of the book, there was perhaps a real interest in Shreveport history through sort of a non-traditional approach. If I told Shreveport Bossier City that I was going to do a tour of Shreveport that was just going to be a history tour, I dare say we would get as much interest as if we offered the haunted folklore along with it.
Now, how many people come to the haunted tours?
I do 2 or 3 of these a month, and the maximum capacity I have per tour is 27 people, and I almost always fill up.
Wow.
They almost always fill up.
Now, if somebody is watching and wants to catch one of the tours, is there a website?
Yes,
they can
there is
go
a
to?
website, and it's real easy. It's historichauntsofshreveport.com.
Okay.
It's the same title of the book, historichauntsofshreveport.com. We also have a Facebook page. And we have 2 tours coming up, one on March 13th, which is Thursday,
Yep.
and one on March 20th, the next Thursday.
How long are the tours?
They last about 3 hours.
So it's thorough,
We
and you
have
get a lot of history
we have
in
a
there.
trolley tour. We actually do full inside tours of several of these places. Do a little bit of a walking tour through Oakland Cemetery, which is probably our city's most significant historic landmark. And what we found is that it's not only a great way to raise awareness about these places that are endangered, because some of them are endangered, but also it's raised funds, because all of our net proceeds go back to historic preservation. So we've raised over $5,000 since the last quarter of last year.
Wonderful.
To donate to historic preservation.
Which of the, and you cover Oakland Cemetery, you cover Municipal Auditorium,
Yes.
Johnny Cash and Elvis may be in there.
Yes, I think Johnny Cash and Elvis are.
Yeah. Elvis may not have left the building
He may
after
never
all.
left the building after all.
Byrd High School, the Logan Mansion you've already mentioned, the Davis Home Place, and of course, if you are my age, the Four-Bean, we all know about the Four-Bean Ghost.
Doesn't everyone
right?
remember the Four-Bean Ghost?
The Four-Bean Ghost, yeah.
Yes. You know, it's interesting that when we sort of tracked down the folklore of many of these places, we did actually had some surprises. We debunked some things, but we also ran into some interesting sort of almost cultural phenomenon that you find everywhere, universally. The Four-Bean Ghost, there's 2 different versions of that story. You know, now when I was in high school, what we would do is we'd go out and sit on the railroad tracks, park the car on the railroad tracks, and dust the rear of the trunk with talcum powder or baby powder, and then wait for the little tiny handprints to appear magically, right? The other version of that is that there was a conductor on a train.
Right, so the light.
That was wandering out there looking for his head,
right.
Carrying this light. And I always wondered about that, because how do you look for your head if you don't have your head on your body? But at any rate, what we found is that there is a version of this story in every town that's large enough to have a railroad crossing.
Really?
And it is something about the folklore of the crossroads. And it's probably an ancient thing that anytime you have 2 roads that meet, or you have a means of transport somewhere else, that there is a folklore associated, almost a superstition associated with, am I going to make the wrong choice? Am I going to go the wrong way?
Right.
Yeah. So
right.
It's really fascinating.
Well, this is an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are any of these, are you more compelled with any, are you drawn more to any one of these places?
Yeah, actually there's a couple of them that I think, or maybe perhaps 3 of them. The Logan Mansion certainly has not only a lot of lore associated with it, but also some pretty compelling testimony from people who have experienced things there.
Yeah, and it is again a private home.
It is a private home. Billy and Vicki LeBrun purchased that home, and I know they don't mind me plugging them because they've done such a wonderful job.
It's a beautiful place.
Purchased that home in 2005.
And it needed some tender, loving care.
Oh, yeah. And they have made a commitment not only to restoring that to its 1897 grandeur, but they've made a commitment to living in a rather undesirable area of Shreveport.
Right.
because they love that old home. So, we don't know how many Victorian homes Shreveport had, maybe as many as 20, 25, but we certainly don't have very many of them left.
That's right.
So there's that, and then I think there's also some compelling stories about the Municipal Auditorium, simply because it has attracted so much national attention as being one of the most haunted places in America.
Now, have you been on some of the tours and hung out
Yes.
down there
Yes, I have.
overnight and all of that? And
I've never spent the night in there.
Okay.
But we're looking maybe to try to do that on a fundraiser we're going to do this summer. That would be like a public ghost hunt. Can't give too much details about it yet because we don't have a date nailed down, but I am in conversations with Municipal Auditorium about something like that. And it has a lot of lore, but also when you, again, from the historical perspective, when you remember how many functions that building has had since it came into existence in the 1920s, again, it bears the impressions of so many different people and places.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It is certainly part of our story.
Oh, yes, indeed.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to dive in. How wicked are we?
Pretty wicked.
Are we pretty wicked?
We're pretty wicked.
So, I mean, there's a lot that we're going to talk about from Bonnie and Clyde. We all know about Bonnie and Clyde,
you
right?
all know about Bonnie and Clyde.
But how many of us know about, is it the Butterfly Man?
The Butterfly Man, a lot of people don't know that story.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize that Shreveport operated a legal red light district.
We're going to talk about a madam or two.
Yes.
In fact, the statue of Leadbelly, he's
Yes.
pointing. He's
Pointing
pointing
to
down,
Fannin Street.
pointing
Right.
down there, right?
Yes, he is.
And
Yes, he is.
there may be a reason that he's pointing
That's
the way
right.
he's pointing.
That's right.
Folks, we are talking to Dr. Cheryl White today. She is the author of many books that make history fun. Historic Haunts of Shreveport, Wicked Shreveport. Her newest book, we'll talk about it today too, Confederate General Leonidas Polk. All of that today with our life strategist, Dr. Cheryl White.
Thank you.
Here on Strategies for Living. Stay with us. More to come.
The pain will not control us. It will never break us, define us, or keep us still. Because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
Going up. Action.
Take 4.
Early start on our Buffalo weekend.
In the kitchen, that's not what she sent her to watch. You sound
It's fine. Everything is fine. I gotta go.
That was awesome, dude.
Shot 40, take 1,297.
Guys, help me!
Good, good.
And welcome back. Welcome back into the TV version of Strategies for a Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. You're watching Strategies for a Living today. You know, you can listen to Strategies for a Living because we started on the radio. That is part of our history.
Oh, that's great.
Dr. Cheryl White. We started on News Radio 710 Keel in 1992, 22 years ago. We are still on News Radio 710 Keel, Sunday mornings, 9:05 to 10. And you can also hear us on healthylife.net out of Los Angeles. You can catch us on strategiesforliving.com, where you can also see these television versions of Strategies for Living. So got a lot going, and we've got a lot going with Dr. Cheryl White today because we are making history fun. She certainly does that with her books. We've been talking about historic haunts of Shreveport. We're about to talk about wicked Shreveport and about Confederate General Leonidas Polk. And this is your newest book.
Yes, that's the newest.
All the books are available at local booksellers,
Yes, local booksellers,
Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com.
Absolutely.
I know I downloaded Wicked Shreveport to my...
Yes, they're all ebooks.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so easy to get and fun to read. You said we were wicked, huh?
It was wicked.
Yeah, we're pretty wicked. Well, you know, we were... Ernie Robertson, when he was here, told us that for a while we were the outermost part of the United States.
It's
we
true.
we were the jumping off point,
It's
if
true.
you will.
When you think about the fact that Texas was a republic,
Right.
an independent
It was its
republic,
own country.
It was its own country.
Yep.
When Shreveport was established in the 1830s, we were truly a frontier town. And the gateway to Texas is the reason, of course, that Highway 80 even exists.
Right.
Is because
Texas
Shreveport,
Street.
Right.
Right.
That's what Texas was, the road to Texas. So,
So let's see, we had a red light district.
yes.
Of course, we all know about Bonnie and Clyde.
Right.
And you mentioned the Butterfly Man. Now,
Right.
who was the Butterfly Man? A
The
lot of people don't know the Butterfly Man.
Fred Lockhart was a drifter who came through Shreveport in 1933, 1934. We're not really sure how long he was here, but he made paper butterflies and sold them down on Texas Street in front of the courthouse, which I think probably lends a little more of a creepy element to his story, because he used these apparently to entice perhaps a 15-year-old girl named Mae Griffin.
And she was engaged.
She was
beautiful girl,
engaged,
engaged to be
girl.
married.
Yes.
Back in those days, 14, 15, you needed to be married, right?
That was the marrying age. Maybe she was even a little older than you might have expected for a marrying age. But at any rate, the story is, of course, that he kidnapped, raped and murdered her, dumped her body in a deserted area, although it was near a residential area. And Shreveport was absolutely shocked by the brutality of that crime.
Right.
And the seeming just sort of like came out of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing about that shocked me when I read it was from conviction, or actually the actual arrest, to the execution was only a matter of days.
36 days.
Talk about swift
36
justice.
days. And again, I think it reflects sort of the cultural norm, the social norm of that era was for justice to be swift. And if anything, it reminds us that, that Shreveport did still have that early sort of vigilante justice mentality.
Right.
Because you know that the Caddo Parish coroner, Dr. Willis Butler, who actually the Historic Haunts book is dedicated to.
Yes.
Dr. Willis Butler actually stopped a lynch mob from storming the courthouse. Insisting that no justice would be properly done, but that he was not going to be taken from his cell and hung from a tree.
Well, and the Butterfly Man, they had to call out the National Guard to protect and make sure that he got a fair trial.
Yes, that he got a fair trial and that due process was done, yes.
Now, the red light district.
Yes.
Annie McCune.
Annie McCune.
You're lighting up.
Shreveport's madam.
You like that?
Yeah, I just think that she's such an enigmatic figure. We don't know a lot about her, and that sort of adds to her mystery.
Right.
She was Irish, Annie McCune. We think she came from Ireland in 1840, probably as a teenager. Maybe
saw a lot of opportunity.
Yes.
Right here in the port city.
Saw a lot of opportunity. We think that she may have been working originally in New Orleans, and that she may have migrated northward with the Union Army.
How was prostitution looked at in those days in the frontier areas?
I think that it's fair to say that most people would have seen it as a necessary evil.
Okay.
It was a vice for sure. Of course, it's always been defined as a vice, even
Right.
in ancient times. But most of our history, cultures have been at least moderately accepting of it, some more than others.
It goes back and it's mentioned in the first 5 books of the Bible.
Absolutely.
It's
It
mentioned
absolutely
if you
is.
believe Moses wrote those, then Moses
The
dealt
world's
with it.
oldest profession is
Right.
what we've always called it. So it's one of those things that I think that society would rather not have. But if, as Shreveport saw it in 1903, if we're going to have it, let's segregate it and control it. Let's put it in an undesirable neighborhood. It'll be out of the view of the rest of the public.
Right.
And we can regulate it, control it, tax it, you know, and it was a legal red light district.
How popular did it become?
Again, that's sort of difficult to fully understand just because of the nature of it. But clearly, Annie McCune and others, she's just the most famous madam, she clearly operated a very profitable, respected to some degree business. It's said that she could go into any bank in Shreveport and she had unlimited credit.
Well, and she made I read in one of the books, may have been one of these, may have been Ernie's book, that you could buy a beer someplace else for 12 cents or 15 cents, but in her establishment, if you wanted a beer, it was $1 and some odd. So she was making some money.
She was making money. The other thing that I think is so interesting about her is that it would be very easy to dismiss her as having been a prostitute herself. We know that she was because we have a record of her arrest in Shreveport for street walking. The fact that she was so generous with the public of Shreveport, it said of her that there was never a child that she heard of who had a need
that she didn't help.
she didn't meet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we think we know, we think we have somebody put in a box, and
people
they
are
scoot
always
out.
complex.
Yes. So, Bonnie and Clyde, do we know everything? I mean,
No.
haven't all of us heard about Bonnie and Clyde?
I think the biggest story about Bonnie and Clyde that people miss is that they're really only a symptom. You know, they're a symptom of a bigger issue, which was the Great Depression.
I looked at their picture that you have in Wicked Shreveport, one of Clyde's pictures, and what struck me, I guess I'd never looked at it this way. He had he was a young man. He was a very young man. He had like a baby face.
He was a young man, baby-faced.
I know there was another criminal named Babyface, but I mean, Clyde looked, he didn't look like the hardened criminal that he's presented to be.
He could have been the all-American boy.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. But that, you know, the bigger story there is depression era crime. The fact that, you know, people were, I think, fundamentally financially unstable, insecure. We sort of see this phenomenon of the American gangster. They become the new sort of anti-hero when you think about Dillinger, sort of the cultic following that he had.
Yeah. Now, your newest book.
Yes.
I know you're proud of this.
Yes.
Louisiana's Fighting Bishop.
Fighting Bishop.
Leonidas Polk. Fort Polk is named for him, but he was also an Episcopal. Was he an Episcopal bishop?
He was an Episcopal bishop. He was the first Episcopal bishop of Louisiana. He came to Louisiana, established a sugar plantation near Thibodaux. So he did that for a while. He owned over 400 slaves.
Whoa.
So he's, again, sort of an interesting enigma because he also was a bishop in the church and saw absolutely no contradiction between the vows that he took as a bishop and taking up arms as a general in the Confederacy, for the Confederacy.
Wow.
So.
Dr. Sherrill, with, again, all of your books make history fun, and I hope that people will take advantage and go to the website, Historic Haunts, go on one of your tours, read the books. But what do you really want to say to people to encourage all of us to pay attention to history?
Well, I think it's important to remember that nothing happens in a vacuum, that everything that we are experiencing, that we understand today in our own society and culture has its origins somewhere else, and that fundamentally people don't change. Human nature is the same today as it was for ancient Greece. And so I think the biggest challenge for us sometimes is to get past the idea that history can somehow be compartmentalized and it has no relevance. It is a living story.
Yeah. And you make that story come to life in your book. So thank you for that.
You.
And thank you for coming and being a part
Thank
of
you for having me.
Strategies
This
for
was
Living.
fun.
We're going to have to do this again because we just barely scratched the surface of all these books.
All right.
All right, folks, if you want to get the books yourself, Historic Haunts of Shreveport, Dr. Cheryl White and Dr. Gary Joyner, and then Wicked Shreveport, Bernadette Palumbo, Dr. Gary White, Chris Hale, and Cheryl White, and her newest book, Confederate General Leonidas Polk, Louisiana's Fighting Bishop. All of them available at your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Go get them. Learn your history. Dr. Cheryl White, thank you again.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you for being a part of Strategies for Living. Don't forget to tune in to part of our history, the radio program, News Radio 710 Keel, Sunday mornings between 9:05 and 10, and at www.strategiesforliving.com. For Dr. Cheryl White, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time here on Strategies for Living.